And if we keep looking at this as a challenge to do the right thing instead of just accept who we are in Him, then we go about this from a different lens. Let me take you to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13, Old Testament, in the middle of a book that I'm going to tell you, folks, if you've never spent some time in Numbers, you want to watch out, because that is one more boring book. That's not where you thought I was going to go with that, is it? I mean, in all seriousness, a book of lists of people and how many of them there are is no more exciting then than it would be now. It's like an accounting ledger, and that's your Saturday afternoon recreational reading. It's just not fun. Numbers is full of that. Every now and then, the clouds part, the sun shines through, and Numbers shines. It glows with these amazing little stories. Granted, they don't last long, and Numbers can't help itself. Even in the middle of great stories, here comes a 7-verse list of people and their names and who their grandpa was and how many kids are in their family. And sometimes you got to navigate those waters a little bit. We're going to do that in a second. But I want to take you to Kadesh Barnea, where the children of Israel have been hanging out around Mount Horeb for a while. We just had our second Passover after leaving Egypt. The children of Israel have been what Deuteronomy would call a long time in that wilderness. We're not even in the wilderness stage of their journey yet. That's about to happen. It doesn't have to happen at all. Israel doesn't have to have 40 years in the wilderness. That only happens because of this tragic moment that we're about to talk about for a second. And it never had to happen that way at all. Look at how Numbers 13 opens. And the Lord spoke to Moses and said, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, to find out whether or not they can beat up the inhabitants of the land." Anybody following along knows that's not what that verse says. But if you didn't read that verse and you just read the rest of the chapter, you'd swear that must be what God told them, because that's exactly what they're about to do. Something's in front of them that should be easy to see. But because they already have a preconceived notion of how you're supposed to take lands, they're not going to see it. So let's read what God really said. Verse 2, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers send a man, every one a leader among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. And then I give you permission to skip verses 4 through 16, because there's a bunch of guys, and what tribe they belong to. Numbers, again, just can't help herself. There it is, okay? But on your way through that long list of this person and this person and this person, they're just the guys that Moses sends in. We get to 17. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, Go up this way into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, whether they're forests or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Period. End quote. Moses is done talking, and he talked way too much. Moses has this habit. Moses had this, he has who he is forged by a fire in a wilderness and a bush that burns and is not consumed. And he can't help himself. You will find that frequently in the Old Testament, God will give Moses an instruction, a rather simple one, and Moses will come down the mountain and make it a little more complex. Because that tends to be what happens when we have to structure people's obedience around a system of rules. You'll never come up with enough rules. That happened to Israel. They have law, they have to have another one because someone just found a way to do something we hadn't covered yet. So they'd come to Moses and go, now what do we do? And Moses would go, let's write another law. Let's add another one to that because we can't let that happen again. Have you noticed that happens in the world? And so that's a whole diametrically opposed system than the way the Holy Spirit functions in our heart. But Moses is told, go spy out the land because I'm giving it to you. And what does Moses do? He says, let's go find out how big the cities are. Let's go find out how big the people are. Let's go find out what the stuff is. Moses even says, let's go find out if it's a good land or a bad land. That's a dumb one. Why would God give you a bad land? Really? I mean, God goes, hey, go in. I'm going to give you the land. Moses goes, let's go figure out if it's good or not. What's that say about Moses' theories about God? Maybe God's given us a land we don't want? I think they're looking right at what they can have, and it's theirs for the taking because God said, I'm going to give it to you. And they filtered that land through their idea of conquering. So we're going to have to go in the way the world goes in. We're going to have to do it the way the world does it. I think the church for a long time has borrowed the systems of the world in the way that we present Christianity. Something's right in front of us that we miss, and we borrow the tactics of those around us. And so Moses says, let's go find out what it is. Is it good? Let's take a look. But look at the last phrase of 20. I did that whole period end quote thing, not because I was just being dramatic. I wanted you to see something. This verse doesn't end with Moses talking. This verse ends a sentence later because the Holy Spirit jumps in, I think, at the end of this verse and reminds the reader of something. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. And I love this literature, the way this literature lays out for us, because this comes out of nowhere. This is a left field statement. Moses is telling you, go in, check it out, find out how many cities there are, how big they are, what big's the army, what size are the people. And then all of a sudden, as the narrator comes in, he goes, it was the time for the first ripe grapes. It's as if the Holy Spirit is reiterating, remember, I'm giving it to you. Why am I giving it to you? Because it's full of good stuff. And all you got to do is let me give it to you. If you let me give it to you, it's going to be good stuff. God was giving them the land. What does Jesus come along and say? My little children, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Start with my little children. It's Father's good pleasure. Know that you're His children. Know that it's the Father's pleasure to give. His heart is giving, by the way. It's always been His heart. His heart is giving. It's my pleasure to give you the kingdom. Whatever it is that you need, your inheritance, it's my pleasure to give you the inheritance and not make you pay for it and not earn it. Man, we have lost the sense of sonship. And losing the sense of sonship has made us lose a sense of ownership. And losing a sense of ownership has caused us to look at the world as going to hell in a handbasket. I think we're missing out on the glories of what it means to be His kid.